19 minutes past 8 now. This may get your goat a little bit. The National Trust has quietly updated its values to prioritise embracing the traditions of different cultures.
Yes, the charity has also removed references to words like history and countryside.
So why would it do this? Is it trying to erase or downplay traditional British values?
Well, to debate this morning, we're joined by political commentator Charlie Downs and director at the Climate Media Coalition, Donnachadh McCarthy. Morning, you two. Donnachadh, let's start with you. Do you think that this is the National Trust erasing British values?
Absolutely not. I looked at the website last night and top 3 headlines, history and heritage. This is an invented story by a German-owned billionaire newspaper yet again, attacking one of Britain's great institutions. The National Trust is amazing. It manages 620,000 acres, 500 homes. It's got 10,000 volunteers, all run with a single penny of taxpayer money. It's one of our great institutions. Why is it Telegraph constantly attacking British institutions? I think we need to stop this and value this amazing, amazing British institution.
It's a fair point, isn't it, Charlie?
Well, the National Trust certainly is, in theory, a great British institution, just like the BBC, for example. These things, in theory, are wonderful. I think, personally, that it's entirely appropriate that we have, for example, a national broadcaster, as well as an institution to which we trust our, beautiful landscapes, stately homes, and so on. But the fact of the matter is, the story of what's happened to the National Trust is very much the same as what's happened to the BBC and indeed every other major institution in our country, which is that they were set up with the best of intentions, but in recent decades have been, frankly, infiltrated by a class of people who all share the same beliefs, the same view of the world, and have essentially been taken over and subverted. And these people, what unites them is, in my view, a university education, a view of the world that is very progressive and liberal, and which, when that interfaces with reality, ends up sounding like anti-white hatred, anti-British hatred. And so, that's, I think, what's happened to the National Trust. And now my view is that we should not be looking at, closing down the National Trust or the BBC or anything like that. We need to essentially clear these people out, create a culture in which these sorts of beliefs, the idea that, for example, the National Trust, their responsibility is to, be a movement, and sort of be a politically active organisation, and actually fill it with patriots, people who love the country.
Charlie, the National Trust has 5 million members. Are you saying 5 million members are all infiltrators? It's got 10,000 volunteers. It's an amazing institution. For example, this issue about inclusivity. In the past, Britain had a culture of intolerance against other religions. It would have actually burnt people like you, Catholic people like you, at the stake. I don't see any problem with the National Trust telling the history of the owners of their buildings. Some of their owners of the buildings would have exploited Irish people during the famine, and they would have had wealth from that. What is wrong with telling those stories? A proud, confident nation embraces its history, the good and the bad. And that is what I think this brilliant British institution is doing. And I think that the carping from foreign billionaire-owned media that you're regurgitating, and frankly, I thought somebody like you from your organisation would actually oppose this infiltration of Britain by foreign media billionaires and reclaim our sovereignty in the media. What are you talking about? Stop attacking British institutions on behalf of foreign billionaires.
Very good. Yes. Well, you'll hear no defence of the Telegraph from me, but the fact is, this is the story that's been reported. And having looked at the National Trust website as you have, I can't help but, and also, by the way, having been to National Trust sites recently, like I went to, Box Hill, for example, in Surrey, which is a beautiful place. But on the billboard, there was all this stuff about, walking groups that were just exclusively for ethnic minorities. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, that's not representing the interests of the majority of British people. And as I say, if you have spent any time reading, essentially what amounts to any social science university syllabus, as I regrettably have, you will be familiar with the kind of drivel that the National Trust is coming out with about marginalised communities and being a group, a movement for everyone in the world.
Well, it's all right.
Britain.
All right, Charlie. So, Donnachadh, as far as that goes, and I am a member of the National Trust, shouldn't it be focusing on the beautiful land it owns, the beautiful buildings, and actually what is effectively our history, good and bad? Shouldn't that be the focus of what it's there for?
Absolutely, and there in the headlines, if you look at the website, is Britain's national heritage and history. If you go to the website, 99% of it refers to exactly that, Stephen. I don't see what the problem is here. We've actually got a successful institution that's managing 620, it's planting 20 million trees. 20 million trees is planting on behalf of Britain. We wouldn't have access to 800 miles of our coastline without the National Trust. We would have lost 500 houses to the public if we didn't have it.
So why is it feeling the need to have itself as a sort of campaigning organisation on other issues and talking about different cultures rather than just our own?
Well, you're actually looking at the screen at this moment. You're looking at one of the most amazing wildlife reserves a seabird wildlife reserve. Climate change is devastating those seabird colonies. Climate change is devastating its forests, its land. And so therefore it sees it necessary to stand up and actually on behalf of Britain defend our climate and defend our farmers, because with no climate, there's no farmers, Stephen. I think it's really good that they're doing that on behalf of Britain.
Charlie, last word to you.
Well, look, I'm a believer in protecting the environment, and I think that one of the roles of the National Trust should be to preserve the glorious British countryside. But climate change is a very different thing to that, because it's essentially, climate change is a narrative that everywhere and always ends up ceding more power to central government. It's essentially a kind of formula used to, I think, impose greater controls over the lives of ordinary people. And at the end of the day, I mean, Britain accounts for less than 1% of global emissions. So no matter how hard the National Trust tries, ultimately, we're not going to be able to have a particularly noticeable effect on global climate change. So I think it's just silly. And at the end of, ultimately, the National Trust, its purpose is to preserve our stately homes, preserve our natural spaces, and it shouldn't be involving itself in weird ideological projects like climate change and opening these spaces up to ethnic minorities. It should just do its job.
Oh my gosh,
like every
are you
other
actually
institution.
saying... You've just said that you're saying to want to exclude ethnic minorities from our premises. Look, the National Trust has to actually have income. Excluding 18% of our population because you want them excluded, it's crazy. It's 18% of the income. We want to attract everybody into the National Trust for their pleasure, but also to make sure it's economically viable. Why exclude anybody?
There, we must leave it because we're out of time. Donnachadh McCarthy, Charlie Downs, thanks both very much indeed.
You will have a view on that at home, gbnews.com/your say. A National Trust spokesperson has told GB News that the National Trust's mission has always been and remains to promote the permanent preservation of places of historic interest or natural beauty. As the opening message explains on our updated website, as Europe's biggest conservation charity, we look after nature, beauty and history for everyone to enjoy. It's important to us that we have certainly not replaced history with culture.
All right, coming up for you.